Hey everyone, it's Jenna. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you 3 really easy DIYs that are really simple to do. They use super affordable materials and they resemble some really high-end designer pieces that can cost hundreds of dollars. So it's going to be a really great way to get that high-end designer look and feel in your space without spending a lot of money, which you guys know is like the anthem of my channel. So not only am I going to show you how to create these pieces, but I'm also going to give you a couple of styling examples so you can get some ideas on how to use them in your own space. So it should be a really fun video, and without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so for our first DIY, I was super inspired by these clay beads that I saw on Pure Salt Interior's website. I love how they have that found vintage look to them that really helps to add character to your space and is something a lot of designers incorporate into their designs. And I also love that they have kind of an earthy feel, color, and texture to them, which also helps your space to feel very grounded. They're a really versatile decor piece, but I just did not love the $238 price tag. Not something that was very practical for me, so I decided to try to make them on my own, and this is how I did it. Okay, so I first started with a big chunk of air dry clay, and I just took pieces that were slightly smaller than a golf ball in size, and I just rolled and pressed down to get a disc-like shape. And then I just used this meat thermometer that I had laying around to make the hole for our beads, but you can use whatever you have on hand, like a pencil, a kebab skewer, a toothpick, whatever. You just want to make sure that your hole is big enough so when you're putting the string through later, you don't run into issues with it being too small. And I found that it really helped to have a little bowl of water on hand to smooth out any rough edges or big divots that the meat thermometer left behind, and I ended up making about 40 beads in total. And because I wanted this piece to have a clay-like vintage earthy look, I went in with a paper towel and just dabbed the beads to give them a little bit of extra imprinted texture, which will come in handy later with the technique that we're going to use to age them. So once the beads had dried, I went in with this Waverly chalk paint in the shade Hazelnut. And you all know that these Waverly chalk paints are my favorite because of the rustic finish that they give to projects and the variety of earthy tones that they come in. And you can get them at Walmart, and they're pretty affordable as far as chalk paints go. I really like this color because it's a slightly orangey brown, which is great for creating that authentic base to our beads so that they really resemble clay. And I just painted all of the beads on one side, let them dry, and then I flipped them over and I painted the other side. So now is where we really get to start aging these beads and making them look really authentic. So here I just took chalk paint in the shade Truffle and a black acrylic paint because I didn't have any black chalk paint, water, and a sponge. You can totally use acrylic paints for this whole thing. I just prefer chalk, but we are going to make a wash here. So we're just going to dip our sponge in the water, pick up some of the darker paint so that they're slightly watered down, and start dabbing it on the beads. Now, when I did this, I really made a point to vary the amount in which I was using this wash technique on the beads. I kind of broke it up into 3 levels. Number 1 was super light, where basically I only gave the beads a couple of random dabs where the majority of the color was still our base hazelnut showing through, and then medium, where there was some hazelnut color showing through, and dark, where I made the beads almost totally black. I also too just wanted to note that I ended up kind of discarding the truffle chalk paint color, and I used mostly black acrylic paint with this wash technique. So this is really going to help our beads vary in color and give it a ton of extra visual interest, and also make the beads look like they have been really authentically aged over time. Now for the grand finale, I just took this skin tone chalk set and used one of the medium brown shades and started making a ton of chalk dust with it on a paper plate, and then I just rubbed a little bit of the dust on each bead, and this just really gets into all of those textured creases and crevices that we made earlier with the paper towel, and helps these to look really clay-like and gives them that dirty, aged artifact look that we're really going for here with this piece. And lastly, I just took this jute cord that was also from Walmart. It was very affordable and is great to have on hand for future projects, and I just tied a loop knot and then I tripled it to ensure that none of the beads would slip out of it, and just started stringing them on. And I tried my very best to vary the colors, get it, so that my dark, medium, and light beads had a good natural variation and just looked really organically spaced out. And then I just did the same thing on this end with the triple knot to tie it all together. Get it? Sorry, I'm just on a roll with these jokes right now, but that is it, you guys. So I just love how versatile this piece is when going to use it in decor styling. You can drape it in and out of a bread bowl, on a mantle, or a dining table. You can use it to add an extra pop of texture to some decorative books or boxes for some added height and visual interest. You can also use it as some bowl filler in a medium-sized decorative bowl. I feel like using this piece as accent decor just really helps your styling to feel very designer, very elevated, and just really effortless. And it would also be great to use in shelf styling. I popped it in a vintage stone tray that I have, and I absolutely love the organic, earthy detail this adds to my decor. All right, so for our next DIY, something that I've been seeing a lot of lately on designer websites are really pretty textured books with neutral spines that are used for decorative purposes, and I really think that these help elevate the look of shelf styling decor, coffee table decor, console table, whatever, but they kind of add up price-wise when you start to buy a lot of them or you need a big group of them, which usually you do for shelves, so that's what I'm personally using mine for, and I just figured I could create something very similar for a fraction of the cost, and this is what I came up with. So the first place that I started for this DIY was the thrift store. This is such a good place to get decorative books, and at my local thrift store you can get hardcover ones for $1. So when picking them out, I like to look for books that are larger in size so that they make a statement, and an added bonus if they have a really thick binding. And another thing that I wanted to use for this project were storage books. These tend to have those really thick bindings, and to get them to resemble our designer books, I like to look for ones that have that extra ribbed detailing on them, and I also like that you get the added bonus of being able to store things inside, which makes them really practical. So first I got them all prepped to spray paint, so I just took some painter's tape and taped off all of the pages. If there were any spots that were hard to get, I just used a razor blade to cut along those places. It was helpful to get more of a precise cut, and then I just did the same thing for the real book that I found at the thrift store as well. And next it was time to go in and spray paint, and I wanted a variation of colors, but still kind of all in that white, creamy, tan color range. So I just used some different spray paints that I had left over from previous projects and coated the books with them to give them a nice neutral base to build off of. So I wanted to add some texture to these guys without breaking the bank. So I just dug up some tissue paper from our gift wrapping box upstairs and started crumpling it up. And this is just gonna give it a nice little crinkle effect and help us give that subtle texture to the cover and binding. And then I just took some matte Mod Podge and started painting it on the cover in small sections because it does tend to dry out really quick, but I just pressed the tissue paper on top of my wet Mod Podge, and I also just wrapped the edges around the cover. But if you prefer a more finished look, you could always lay a piece of paper down on top on the inside of the cover to just hide those edges. Mine are going to be more for decorative purposes, and I just didn't feel like going the extra step, but you totally could if you wanted to. So I just left the books to dry for about 2 hours, and once they were ready to be painted, I just did the same paint wash technique that I did in the first project with a darker brown chalk paint, water, and a craft sponge. And this just helps give the book a little bit more dimension and helps accentuate the textured tissue paper because it gets into all of those cracks and creases and really helps highlight them. I did the same thing to my white storage book, but I used a lighter tan color this time, and this just had a much more subtle outcome, but I did do this intentionally because I wanted the two books to look different and have a little bit of contrast when displayed side by side. And that is it, you guys. There are so many ways to style these books. You can mix them in with real coffee table books for a more varied look. You can also use them as maybe a little riser to help give another decor piece, such as a vase, a little bit of extra height and visual interest, and just to add that designer touch to your styling. I also just love the subtle added texture that these bring to your decor. You can also use them laid flat in shelf styling and then pop some accents on top, like some plants or some candles, or you could just use them as coffee table styling and make use of that extra storage to hide away things like remotes and coasters, but still have them easily available. I absolutely love love how these turned out, and I think that they are such a versatile addition to add into your home decor collection. All right, so for this last project, I really wanted to recreate this Restoration Hardware paper mache bowl that goes for over $200. And I love the rustic look of this, and I think it would really add a layer of character to your decor, whether that be shelf styling, coffee table, kitchen countertop, whatever. I just think that this is such a versatile piece to have throughout your home. So let me show you guys what I did. Okay, so first I started with this mixing bowl and just put some saran wrap over the top and sprayed it with some cooking spray so that the paper mache wouldn't stick to the bowl. And then I went to Michael's and picked up this pre-made paper mache mix, and it was pretty affordable, and I've actually made paper mache from toilet paper in the past, but when you add up everything that you need to make that mixture, it's actually more cost effective to buy the pre-made stuff, which I wasn't mad about since it was less work for me, but my only complaint was that it was very dusty. So be sure to wear a mask and maybe do this in an area where you can easily vacuum all of the dust up or just do it outside. So I followed the directions on the box as far as water to mix ratio goes, and I ended up adding about 7 cups of water, but I would definitely recommend adding a little bit of water at a time once you get to the end, because you can always add more water if you want, but once you add too much water and it's too watery, there's really no going back. So I always would just like pour a little bit and then test it, and the consistency that I ended up going with was very similar to the consistency of cookie dough. So once that was mixed, I just took my mixing bowl and started putting the paper mache mixture on it, and once the whole thing was covered, I just used my fingers to kind of blend out any uneven areas and smooth out the ends so it looked a little bit more uniform. You can sand it once this is all dried, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was relatively even. So then I went in to make the little ridge detail similar to the Restoration Hardware one, so I just added a little bit of extra around the edges, and my process was just to blend it and then pinch it. Blend it first so it looks connected, and then pinch it to get that handmade looking detail. And then it was time to add our base. I basically made a hockey puck sized pancake and blended it in evenly to make sure that the bowl would be able to rest on it nice and even and level. And honestly, the worst part about this project was waiting for this thing to dry. The package said 24 to 36 hours, but let me tell you, that is a lie. I tried using a hairdryer. I even took the bowl out and put it in the oven for an hour, but none of that really worked. It just took a lot of time, and every day I would put it out in the sun and my dog would guard it. So cute. But basically it took a full week to dry. So once it had dried, you can see here it was really white, and I wanted to get that rustic aged texture that the Restoration Hardware ones have. So I just took some Waverly chalk paints in the shade Mineral, Fawn, and Truffle, and I did another little paint wash. And as you guys can see, this is a really great technique for adding that rustic aged look to your decor. For the majority of the bowl, I used the 2 lighter colors, but around the rim and edges, that's where I used the darker truffle color to make it look more authentically aged, because those are the places where dirt would naturally gather. And to get a more precise application, I used a paintbrush to apply it in the areas where I wanted it, and then I just used the wet sponge to blend it out. And I love how this really just took it to the next level and made it look really similar to our inspiration piece. You can use this bowl to add a pretty rustic touch to your shelf styling decor. You could display it with some bowl filler on a kitchen countertop or maybe a dining table. You could even use it as a coffee table statement piece. Here I just popped a piece of greenery in it that I got at Hobby Lobby for a great price, and I just love the expensive look that this piece adds to my decor. Super elegant, super rustic, but at the same time very casual, and it gives my styling that really effortless feel. All right, everyone, that about wraps up this video. I hope that you enjoyed it and maybe drew some inspiration from one or several of these projects. Definitely leave me a comment below letting me know which one was your favorite. And if you are not subscribed, make sure that you are, because I come out with a new video every week showing you how to get that high-end designer look on a budget. So make sure you don't miss any of that, and click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. And I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!